Okay, welcome back to me reading Frankenstein. We are on chapter 6 of volume 2. Today on this day, Thursday, October 23rd. Next week's Halloween. I think people should start dressing up as actual Victor Frankenstein. But we don't even know what he looked like. People are just going to dress up as Oscar Isaac now from the Guillermo del Toro movie. We have seen epistolary letters, epistolary writing from Robert explaining his passionate journey to the Arctic, where we met Victor Frankenstein. Young Frankenstein has really screwed me up. And the creature pulled him on the boat. Then we heard like a first person from Victor Frankenstein. And now in volume 2, we are very much hearing the first person account of what the creature has gone through in the last 2 years since Victor created him. And it's really sad, and he's really eloquent, and it's really beautiful. And he ran after Victor while Victor was trying to climb out into the Alps or whatever and be by his own. And the creature just came running. I can't even imagine. Just this like humongous thing coming at you, and you think it's gonna try and kill you. But literally he's like, just listen to me. I just need you to listen. And his story has been really sweet and sad. And he's learning English through these cottagers. He like found a little hovel that he could barely sit up in. At first he was taking food from these cottagers that he's latched onto. But then he realized that they were really poor. And so he stopped stealing their food and he just went out to the woods and picked berries and chopped a bunch of wood for them and did all the chores that Felix, one of the sons, so there's a son, Felix, a daughter, Agatha, and the dad, his name is Dad, I can't remember what his name is. And now some woman who's from Arabia, some Arabian woman is there, and it's made everybody happy. And he's learning English. He's just like peeking through this little tiny hole and learning English, and he's learning how to talk. And the dad's blind, and but they play music, and that's fun. And he's like, and it sounds different than the birds that I remember hearing, the thrush and the blackbird. And then the son, he starts to like do this monotonous sound with his mouth, and that's reading. And he's like, there's letters that I can learn, and he's learning from these cottagers, and he's being very, he's like moving the snow so there's a pathway. He saw Felix doing that every morning, and so he decided to do that. And they like call him his savior or whatever, or angel or whatever, and then he calls them his protectors. So now we're on chapter 6. It's always crazy to me when like bad guys, the creature's not a bad guy, but before this he's always been a bad guy until this book that I've actually read, and now he's like a good guy. He's a good guy. But it's always interesting to me when like bad guys, like the clone, the stormtroopers, like when they first talked, I was like, you guys are clones, but I thought they were supposed to be like machines, but there's people inside there and they're talking. Or like in Lord of the Rings when the orcs and the Uruk-hai first talked, I was like, what are they doing talking? And complaining, we haven't had fresh meat in days, just maggoty bread. It's like, you guys are supposed to be these like killing machines with one thing on your mind, and that's murdering the race of men. And now we hear you, these humongous, big, huge, buff things that were born out of like tree embryos or something. And they're like complaining about only having maggoty bread. It humanizes them, which is good. But in my brain, I'm like, they shouldn't be talking. Maybe that's some bias that I have, that bad guys don't have feelings. But in like a pretend world, like stormtroopers, that you don't see their faces, so you just think there's metal inside. But then they're like, hey, where did he go? With like this super nerdy, hey, there they go. And then they take their helmets off and there's actually people under there. And you're like, that's ruined it for me. But that's just me. Chapter 6. We're still hearing from the creature. The creature is telling his tale. Let us begin. Some time elapsed before I learned the history of my friends. It was one which could not fail to impress itself deeply on my mind, unfolding as it did a number of circumstances, each interesting and wonderful to one so utterly inexperienced as I was. This poor guy is just like a humongous baby. He like stuck his hand in fire to like make his hand warm because he didn't realize that it was going to be hotter inside the fire. If Victor had just stayed around and taught him and wasn't a scaredy cat of his own creation, you think he would have been like wanting to observe? He was scared of himself. He was scared of what he had done, not the creature. Got it. The name of the old man was De Lacy. We figured it out. He was descended from a good family in France, where he had lived for many years in affluence, respected by his superiors and beloved by his equals. His son was bred. It's my least favorite word from this time. A well-bred. I just don't like it. His son was bred in the service of his country. And Agatha had ranked with ladies of the highest distinction. A few months before my arrival, they had lived in a large and luxurious city called Paris. Paris. So bad. Surrounded by friends and possessions of every enjoyment, which refinement of intellect, or taste accompanied by a moderate fortune could afford. The father of Safi, who's the Arabian, had been the cause of their ruin. Oh no, the father. Okay. He was a Turkish merchant and had inhabited Paris for many years when, for some reason which I could not learn, he became obnoxious to the government. He was seized and cast into prison the very day that Safi arrived from Constantinople. Oh, maybe that's why they sing that song in Young Frankenstein. Putting on the Ritz, put on the Ritz. It's such a good... Wow. So we'll have to add to the travel list that we have to go to Turkey because of Frankenstein. I'm plotting a pilgrimage to all the places that I've visited in books that I've read this year, 2025. He was tried and condemned to death because he became obnoxious to the government. What does that mean? This young man is obnoxious. Tie him up and kill him. Right. The injustice of his sentence was very flagrant, and Paris was indignant, and it was judged that his religion and wealth, rather than the crime alleged against him, had been the cause of his condemnation. Condemnation. You can do this. Wow. Wow. We are terrible. Humans are... There, but there's beautiful stuff too. There's beautiful stuff too. That's right. My green. Look at, I got green for Frankenstein because Frankenstein's green for some reason. Beet juice. Pink and green. They actually look really good together, these colors. Look at this. These look good together to me. Yummy beet juice. Okay, this is very sad. Felix had accidentally been present at the trial. His horror and indignation were uncontrollable when he heard the decision of the court. Oh no. He made at that moment a solemn vow to deliver him, and then looked round for the means. After many fruitless attempts to gain admittance to the prison, he found a strongly grated window in an unguarded part of the building which lighted the dungeon of the unfortunate Mahometan. Mahometan? Mahometan. Is that his name? Who, loaded with chains, waited in despair the execution of the barbarous sentence. Felix visited the grate at night and made known to the prisoner his intentions in his favour. The Turk, amazed and delighted, endeavoured to kindle the zeal of his deliverer by promises of reward and wealth. Oh. Felix rejected his offer with contempt, yet when he saw the lovely Safie who was allowed to visit his father, and who, by her gestures, expressed her lively gratitude, the youth could not help owning to his own mind that the captive possessed a treasure which would fully reward his toil and hazard. The Turk quickly perceived the impressions that his daughter had made on the heart of Felix, and endeavoured to secure him more entirely in his interests by the promise of her hand in marriage. So soon as he should be conveyed to the place of safety. Felix was too delicate to attempt this offer. Yet he looked forward to the probability of the event as to the consummation of his happiness. Men. No, this is fine. During the ensuing days, while the preparations were going forward for the escape of the merchant, the zeal of Felix was warmed by several letters that he received from this lovely girl, who found means to express her thoughts in the language of her lover by the aid of an old man, a servant of her father who understood French. She thanked him in the most ardent terms for his intended services towards her parent, and at the same time she gently deplored her own fate. I have copies of these letters, for I found means during my residence in the hovel to procure the implements of writing, and the letters were often in the hands of Felix or Agatha. Before I depart, I will give them to you. They will prove the truth of my tale, but at present, as the sun is already far declined, I shall only have time to repeat the substance of them to you. Safie related that her mother was a Christian Arab, seized and made a slave by the Turks. Recommended by her beauty, she had won the heart of the father of Safie, who married her. The young girl spoke in high and enthusiastic terms of her mother, who, born in freedom, spurned the bondage to which she was now reduced. She instructed her daughter in the tenets of her religion, and taught her to aspire to higher powers of intellect and an independence of spirit forbidden to the female followers of Muhammad. This lady died, but her lessons were indelibly impressed on the mind of Safie, who sickened at the prospect of again returning to Asia, and being immured within the walls of a harem, allowed only to occupy herself with infantile amusements, ill-suited to the temper of his soul, now accustomed to grand ideas and a noble emulation of virtue. The prospect of marrying a Christian and remaining in a country where women were allowed to take a rank in society were enchanting to her. Wow, so we think people in England were oppressed, but there was definitely much more oppression happening, Wow. That opens the brain up a little bit. Jeez. Because coming from America, I guess, you're like, wow, that caste system in England or Paris or France or wherever, it just sounds bad. But then she wants to be here. But it is just society. It is just society. Okay. I can get over it. The day for the execution of the Turk was fixed, but on the night previous to it he quitted his prison, and before morning was distant many leagues from Paris. Felix had procured passports in the name of his father, sister, and himself. He had previously communicated his plans to the former, who aided the deceit by quitting his house under the pretence of a journey and concealing himself with his daughter in an obscure part of Paris. Felix conducted the fugitives through France to Lyons? I'm certain it's not pronounced Lyons. And across Mont Cenis, Cenis, to Leghorn, where the merchant had decided to wait a favourable opportunity of passing into some part of the Turkish dominions. Safie resolved to remain with her father until the moment of his departure, before which time the Turk renewed his promise that she should be united to his deliverer, and Felix remained with them in expectation of that event. And in the meantime, he enjoyed the society of the Arabian, who exhibited towards him the simplest and tenderest affection. They conversed with one another through the means of an interpreter, and sometimes with the interpretation of looks, and Safie sang to him in the divine airs of a native country. The Turk allowed this intimacy to take place, and encouraged the hopes of the youthful lovers, while in his heart he had formed far other plans. He loathed the idea that his daughter should be united to a Christian, but he feared the resentment of Felix if he should appear lukewarm. For he knew that he was still in the power of his deliverer if he should choose to betray him to the Italian state which they inhabited. He revolved 1,000 plans by which he should be enabled to prolong the deceit until it might be no longer necessary, and secretly to take his daughter with him when he departed. His plans were facilitated by the news which arrived from Paris. The government of France were greatly enraged at the escape of their victim, and spared no pains to detect and punish his deliverer. The plot of Felix was quickly discovered, and De Lacy and Agatha were thrown into prison. The news reached Felix and roused him from his dream of pleasure. His blind and aged father and his gentle sister lay in a noisome dungeon, while he enjoyed the free air and the society of her whom he loved. This idea was torture to him. He quickly arranged with the Turk that if the latter should find a favourable opportunity to escape before Felix could return to Italy, Safie should remain as a boarder at a convent at Leghorn, and then, quitting the lovely Arabian, he hastened to Paris and delivered himself up to the vengeance of the law, hoping to free De Lacy and Agatha by this proceeding. He did not succeed. They remained confined for 5 months before the trial took place, the result of which deprived them of their fortune and condemned them to a perpetual exile from their native country. Terrible. They found a miserable asylum in the cottage in Germany, where I discovered them. Felix soon learned that the treacherous Turk, for whom he and his family endured such unheard-of oppression, on discovering that his deliverer was thus reduced to poverty and ruin, became a traitor to good feeling and honour, and had quitted Italy with his daughter, insultingly sending Felix a pittance of money to aid him, as he said, in some plan of future maintenance. Such were the events that preyed on the heart of Felix, and rendered him, when I first saw him, the most miserable of his family. He could have endured poverty, and while his distress had been the meed of his virtue, he gloried in it. But the ingratitude of the Turk and the loss of his beloved Safie were misfortunes more bitter and irreparable. The arrival of the Arabian now infused new life into his soul. When the news reached Leghorn that Felix was deprived of his wealth and rank, the merchant commanded his daughter to think no more of her lover, but to prepare to return to her native country. The generous nature of Safie was outraged by this command. She attempted to expostulate with her father, but he left her angrily, reiterating his tyrannical mandate. A few days after, the Turk entered his daughter's apartment and told her hastily that he had reason to believe that his residence at Leghorn had been divulged, and that he should speedily be delivered up to the French government. He had consequently hired a vessel to convey him to Constantinople, for which city he should sail in a few hours. He intended to leave his daughter under the care of a confidential servant to follow at her leisure with the greater part of his property, which had not yet arrived at Leghorn. When alone, Safie resolved in her own mind the plan of conduct that it would become her to pursue in this emergency. A residence in Turkey was abhorrent to her. Her religion and her feelings were alike averse to it. But some papers of her father which fell into her hands, she heard of the exile of her lover, and learnt the name of the spot where he then resided. She hesitated some time, but at length she formed her determination. Taking with her some jewels that belonged to her, and a sum of money, she quitted Italy with an attendant, a native of Leghorn, but who understood the common language of Turkey, and departed for Germany. She arrived in safety at a town about 20 leagues from the cottage of De Lacy, when her attendant fell dangerously ill. Safie nursed her with the most devoted affection. The poor girl died, and the Arabian was left alone, unacquainted with the language of the country, and utterly ignorant of the customs of the world. She fell, however, into good hands. The Italian had mentioned the name of the spot for which they were bound, and after her death, the woman of the house in which they lived took care that Safie should arrive in safety at the cottage of her lover. Wow. What a story to cook up. It's a story in a story within a story, and we're learning about the cottagers, and it's just so... From the start of this project, reading out loud all these books that I've never read that everybody's read. It's amazing that people can think of stories. I mean, it's just amazing. Do you think she knew all the parts? She just started. You just start. Bird by bird. That's right. That's right. Join me next time for Chapter 7 of Volume 2, where we're learning more and more and more about this creature's story, Frank. I'm going to call him Frank. We're calling the creature Frank. Our creature Frank is telling us a great story about the cottagers. Happy reading to you all, and ta-ta! Ta-ta!